Last but not certainly least in our communion panel, Dan Ebener, who is our Director of Parish Planning for the diocese, but has also been working with a lot of other dioceses around the country, exploring especially some of this welcoming and belonging stuff. So Dan.
All right, thanks Ryan. And I'd like to thank my fellow panelists here, Colleen, for reminding us to activate the Holy Spirit. Is this working? No. John for reminding us of the importance of hospitality and how it's number one. And Frank really for helping us with liturgical hospitality and giving us this great vision of what that might look like. I'd like to pick up on Frank's last piece of talking about that fresh cup of coffee and what does a one-on-one conversation look like when we're truly listening. So I would like to suggest, first of all, that welcoming doesn't stop at the front door, right? I mean, I think we're basically pretty good at welcoming people when they come into the church. But I'd like to suggest that welcoming also includes welcoming people's thoughts and ideas. That when they come to a parish council meeting, that we're really fully open to what they think. And that we build a relationship with them based on trust and based on our common mission, right? Our common mission and our shared meaning that we get from a relationship with Christ, with each other. That's what belonging is about, right? That belonging is based on that kind of a relationship. So how do we do this? I'd suggest it all starts with listening. And, you know, we're hearing a lot about listening in our church these days, but I don't know that we really listen. About 10 years ago, I was asked to teach a class at Ambrose called Dialogical Skills. And the first book I'd like to suggest that I started using is this book by Edgar Schein called Humble Inquiry. Schein suggests that we live in a culture of tell. And we love to tell people, but we don't do enough asking. And then after asking, to listen. And then a second book that I've been using in the classroom called Conversational Intelligence. This goes really into kind of the science behind conversations, the emotional intelligence and neuroscience behind having one-on-one conversations and what happens inside our brains and what happens inside our hearts when we have really good conversations with each other. So Schein suggests that a conversation, a humble conversation, should start, first of all, with humility. The idea that I believe that I can learn something from you. That the word humility comes from the sense of being human, right? That we're all human and we recognize that we have something that we can learn, that we have something we can gain from a relationship with others. The second quality is curiosity, to be truly curious about what someone can teach us. And then thirdly, empathy, to identify with the feelings that someone else is going through in the story that they're telling us. A lot of these three things, I would say, we could talk about is really what Otto Scharmer calls generative listening. And the concept is that we start by opening our eyes and our ears, but then it extends to opening our hearts. And really, in a neuroscientific way, our hearts connect with each other when we have these kind of conversations. Opening our minds to really listen and discover the fact that we can learn something. And then opening our will, which means being willing to change my mind based on what I've heard from others. So I've been teaching this in the classroom the last 10 years or so, and I've started practicing this myself. In the last 3 or 4 years, I've literally had about 500 of these one-on-one humble conversations with people, not just in our diocese, but around the country, with pastors and teachers and parents and kids. And I'd like to share with you some of the things that I've learned from these conversations. So one of the conversations I had with a woman in Des Moines was a real heartbreaking story. She told me the story about how she went from being her parish council president, active lector, 4 kids that came with her to Mass every Sunday, to now being a member of Hope Lutheran Church. And it was a heartbreaking story that involved, feeling like as if she wasn't treated well because she's a woman, also because she had organized a Lenten series on race and the teachings of the church on race, and she was being criticized on social media by her fellow parishioners. And she just got fed up with it all and just left. And after I listened to her for an entire hour, she said to me, Dan, if someone in my parish had listened to me the way you just did, I'd still be a member of that parish.
And I began to realize that, these humble conversations could also be a form of evangelization. That evangelization really starts with building a trusting relationship with someone else. And that's kind of what humble inquiry is all about, is building trust. Now, it doesn't necessarily include an explicit proclamation of the gospel, which is part of, I would say, one-on-one evangelization, but it creates the conditions, the relationship upon which we can then share the gospel and make that explicit proclamation of the gospel. In the 40 parishes that we've studied so far I've been doing research with Catholic Leadership Institute, with parishes around the country. I would say the number one thing that I've heard from people is that they need training in one-on-one evangelization. They're looking for just training on this. And I would suggest that, it really just starts with listening. Just listen to people intently, actively, generative listening to build that trust. And then, yes, at some point, to share your love for Christ in a way that Colleen was talking about, sharing your love for your favorite restaurant. Or I might suggest, the way you talk to the guys about your favorite baseball team. If we can talk about how much we love the Cubs, why can't we talk about how much we love Jesus, right? I mean, really, it's kind of the same thing. Now, on the other hand, I've heard some heartbreaking stories about, how this doesn't always happen. I heard from a friend who told me that, he'd be a Catholic today, except for 25 years ago when he and his wife were looking to get married. They called a Catholic church here in Scott County, and they were told that on the day they wanted to get married, which was a year from now, that the only time available was 3 p.m., and they had to be out of there by 4 o'clock because they had a 4:30 Mass to prepare for. He said they went to the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church, got an entirely different response, and now they've been active in the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church for 25 years. These are the on-ramps that can become off-ramps to evangelization, right? The weddings and funerals should be on-ramps into Christian discipleship. I mean, I have another friend who says one of the best things the Catholic Church does is funerals, okay? But he doesn't really feel a sense of belonging or welcoming because he says the way they make the announcement before the communion just doesn't work for him. So I think we've got a way to go on weddings and funerals. We all know that the number of weddings and funerals being held outside the Catholic Church is on the increase nationally, right? So I think we've got a long way to go on this, but I've also heard some really inspiring stories. So I heard from a priest who told me that one of the things he likes to do is pick 3 to 5 people every week to hold a one-on-one conversation with. And he meets with them just for about a half an hour each. You're talking about an hour and a half or 2.5 hours a week. They told me the story about one retired person who came into church. He started coming to daily Mass every day. And so this priest, sat down, did a one-on-one with him, and now the guy is involved in all kinds of ways in the church. I talked to another priest who said that he was helping 2 churches go through a merger, and at one point he said there was so much contention that on Holy Saturday he set up a sign-up sheet for people to come in every half hour for an 8-hour period on Holy Saturday. And he said people just felt listened to, and the merger went so much better after he did that listening. So I would suggest that a lot of this listening we could learn from these books, yes, conversational intelligence. I think one of the things we can learn is that if we are multitasking, and one of those tasks is listening, then we're not really listening. We're just not. And I would also suggest that, once you have really listened to someone else, they're going to want to listen to you, right? The research actually shows this, that once people have fully been listened to, they feel that sense of respect that Frank was talking about, that sense of, look at me again and see the dignity of this human person. And I think that's what respect is. And so I would suggest that, we listen, build that relationship, and then we share. We share our love for Christ. Thank you very much.